Okay, so Cadence, which for those that don't know was their former Future Facilities, you just carried out a survey looking at end users' attitudes to digitalization, digital transformation. And I guess it'd be good to understand what you uncovered in terms of what were seen as the main reasons, or more importantly, the main benefits for them in terms of going down that route.
Yeah, sure. So as Future Facilities and obviously now Cadence, we've been working with data center owner operators, helping them design and operate their data centers for 20 years, operating in this kind of the space where digital becomes physical. And we wanted to sort of understand the drivers behind that, the pace of change in the data center. So we did this research to look at the pace of digital transformation. And so we actually looked at two sides of this coin. So we looked at, we interviewed, or the market research went out to talk to both digital transformation leaders, but also IT leadership. So the two different functions of the business, those which are driving it and those which are essentially on the receiving end of the pace of that change. So we've got two different sets of data, which we were kind of anticipating actually there might be a little bit of disagreement between those silos, but interestingly there was actually a decent amount of alignment, and the major sort of drivers for that change are around transforming from analog to digital. So turning those analog processes in the businesses to digital tools, and that's enabling businesses to work faster, to work more efficiently, and for some it's enabling a full paradigm shift of the way they do business. So and I think we've all experienced that. I think that kind of talks to our own personal experience of how we work in the modern world. You know, I think we all expect a certain amount of digitization of the services we use with organizations. You know, for example, the other day I was trying to set up a direct debit with my bank, and they wanted me to fill out a paper form, and it was I nearly fell off my chair. What paper form? I don't really know what to do with that. So, you know, from our own personal experience, like I say, dealing with the organizations that we deal with in modern life and daily life, we expect that digitization, but also in our work, you know, and obviously this research was carried out just at the tail end of the pandemic, and we all know how that digital transformation was really required for us to be able to continue working, but also that's unlocked certain benefits that enable businesses to work more efficiently, in terms of the work that people are able to do, but also from an environmental standpoint, you know, removing barriers or removing the need for people to travel, being able to do more things remotely, and all that. So that was sort of the major, those were seen as the major drivers and the major benefits. But there was a small subset of people, around a fifth of our respondents, that saw it as a hindrance to the business, and that the digital strategies hadn't really been thought out. So obviously there's a risk there of digitizing for digitization's sake, I suppose, in that, you know, if the digital strategy isn't thought out, and you know, it's just a process of upgrading tools or modernizing tools without really a view onto the strategic implications of that, then that may not necessarily be a boost for the business, but may actually be a drag.
Okay, and in terms of the rate of progress, I'm wondering, bearing in mind the point you just made there, was it as simple as those people that weren't, that fifth that weren't convinced by, you know, the reasons behind it, were those the people where things were moving slowly and everyone else they were going at a decent pace, or what did you discover in terms of how quickly people are heading down the, you know, digital transformation route?
Yeah, sure. So what we uncovered in the survey is actually the majority of people see that the rate of change increasing. So I mean, like I said, this research was done at the tail end of the pandemic. So people were looking back at 2021 and saying, you know, obviously, yes, things were increasing, but actually, people also predicted that over this last year in 2022, that they'd be even further increasing the rate of change. So, and I think, and this wasn't necessarily brought out in the research, but I think we can see that as you start to digitize process, as you start to go from analog to digital and unlock some of the data that was sitting around in analog systems that's now going to be sitting in a digital system, well, that unlocks a whole other raft of possibilities in which you can extract value from that data, which involves another transformation and the incorporation of new services, you know, new technologies like okay, so we've got this mass amount of data, how can we extract value from it? Right, we need some AI technologies, we need machine learning, we're going to have to try and implement that in our technology stack. So that's another transformation, and I think we see that a lot, and you can kind of see that in other bits of research that talk about how things like self-service IT, low code, no code applications, where the development of apps within the business and extracting of value from digital services is moving away from just the technical development teams and into the business units that actually own that data and know the most about that data. And obviously then that itself generates more data, generates more applications, and you know, it's an ongoing transformation cycle.
And in terms, I mean, everyone talks about it, you know, it's a very simple phrase, but behind it, there's a very complex process, as you say, of upgrading from, you know, analog to digital. But what sort of pressures did the survey uncover? The sort of pressures that data center and IT professionals are to provide that infrastructure? And I'm wondering, I mean, the sort of benefits of digital transformation, sort of things like speed and scale, but there's also clearly risks involved with what's going on. So if you can sort of unpick the pressures on folks and what are they being asked to do, and, you know, how easy is it for them to do it, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. So the biggest pressure that we saw on the data center was just one of capacity. That was the biggest response that we got for what's the biggest challenge from a IT point of view in delivering the digital transformation strategy. And it all kind of rests on the capacity of the data center to be able to provide that physical infrastructure, to then provide the IT capacity to provide the digital services that the business requires. And that kind of manifests itself in different ways. So for larger organizations, they were more likely to look at building a new data center versus the smaller organizations. But all of those organizations are also looking to move out to co-location and move out to cloud. So everyone is saying, I need more capacity in my data center. I need more capacity from my IT department, and then they're looking at solving that issue in different ways. When looking at what the restrictions were on their data center capacity, people were saying basically half the respondents said space was the issue. Quarter said cooling and thermal issues were a problem, and then 20% said power availability. And what's kind of interesting in that from my experience and our experience working in understanding the limitations of physical capacity in the data center for our customers, is that there's probably a proportion of that 50% who reported that space was the issue, where the underlying issue would be a thermal one, but over time more space has been used for high density equipment than was perhaps required because of concerns about its thermal impacts, and then that results in data center capacity being used up before it needs to be. So So that's where people are seeing those pinch points. And then from the IT professionals, I mean, the thing that keeps them up most at night about all of this change is obviously delivering uptime and keeping the services running. But what was interesting was that on the other side of that, we had what they responded to with what their key performance indicator was actually the speed of delivering the digital services came top, just above delivering 100% uptime. So that's quite an interesting result, because you would kind of expect that people would, even though the thing that keeps them up at night is the uptime, actually from a business perspective, their key deliverable is actually being able to deliver the digital services in a timely fashion to the business as they try and move through these transformational programs. And I think that kind of speaks to the pace of change throughout many of these industries, and the benefits of being first to market, or the competitive advantages that some of these transformational programs bring, whether they're internal and allowing the staff to identify internal issues that can then be fixed and or mitigated in a predictive way, say using AI or ML, or being able to deliver digital services to the customers in a way that differentiates organizations from their competitors. So if you can identify that there's an issue or a gap in the market, being able to stand that up as quickly as possible, actually from a business perspective, gives you a great advantage.
And in terms of the sort of industry sort of cross-section you interviewed, did you find any variations? I mean, one typically thinks that the finance industry, for example, moves fairly quick because, the sums of money, if you like, put bluntly, is so huge that early mover advantage can be massive. But what did you find in terms of any variations from industry, or is everyone pretty much generally all headed in the same direction?
Yeah, so there was some variation across industry. So we kind of split it up. There was the industries we looked at the respondents were in retail, finance, manufacturing, software, and telecoms. And all of those sectors predicted an increase in their digital transformation strategies over this year. And they were all pretty significant, but the lowest being retail was 63%, but then moving up to telecoms at 84%. And I think if we think about what's happening in the telecom industry and the shift and the rollout of 5G, obviously that's a key driver on top of all of the other sort of technology shifts that are happening across all industries. The telecoms industry is obviously going to be benefiting from the same implementations of AI chatbots to deal with their customers, as you find in say finance, but also there's this huge technology shift that's happening in telecoms that kind of builds on top of that, if you like. So if you think about, I was reading recently about Three, their part of their rollout of their 5G core is also migrating their old 4G core onto the new infrastructure. So that's going to be a huge shift, which will modernize their entire core infrastructure. But that's going to be a huge transformational program, because it's essentially the technological core of the business. And I think that's why we see telecoms out in front with that pace of change. And obviously, coming back to those competitive pressures, getting your 5G capability to market first and making it work well and profitably is going to give anyone in that space a huge advantage.
And I mean, you've alluded to some of the challenges that you're being faced, but I'm just wondering, bearing in mind what you said earlier, that some of the people are not convinced that their digital programs, you know, what they're about, what they're for, is that a major issue for people, just the planning, you know, because again, digital transformation, yeah, we all want to do that, but the actual steps and understanding where your business is, where it needs to be, what, you know, the transformation involves in terms of, you say, whether it's going to a colo, expanding your data center, going to the cloud. I mean, there's a whole complex decision-making process.
Yeah,
was that sort of highlighted in the survey, that you know, as well as the, as you say, the uptime, keeping people awake, is that sort of what people are struggling with, just to understand, you know, the implications of the decision to go in a particular direction?
Yeah, so I think you know, one of like I said, one of the things that we wanted to see is there this tension between the digital strategists on one hand and the IT professionals on the other. And what was actually really interesting and really, I suppose, pleasing to see was that there was really good alignment between the strategists and the IT departments, and almost all of the strategists, something like 98% said, you know, we consider the IT infrastructure capacity as you know, key to these digital transformation programs, and there was a similar level of agreement from the IT professionals. I think it was something like 97 or 96% who said, yes, we're included in these decisions. So not only do the strategists think they're including the IT department in the conversation, but the IT department feel like they're in that conversation, which is great, because, you know, our experience from working historically with data center operators and managers is that there's always been this historic disconnect between, you know, what the business is demanding and what's actually happening in the data center and what the data center can provide. But when we look into that in a bit more detail, there was maybe you know, slightly something like 50% of people said that they work really closely between the strategists and the IT department, and they're fully involved in that decision-making process. So I think there's a certain level of involvement that perhaps, even though they are part of the decision-making process, that the IT can still be consulted. You know, like I say, 50% of them are being consulted, as you know, in a key part of that decision-making team. But then as we look further down, you know, there was maybe a quarter of people who said that they were just sort of consulted, and a lot of the decisions actually went through the board of the organization. What wasn't actually clear in the results quite was how those things linked back to the people who said that they thought that the strategy of the business, what, you know, the digital transformation strategy wasn't quite aligned with the needs of the business. And I think, you know, if depends on who's making the decision, you know, if the strategists and the IT department are both in alignment, but someone further up the chain has made the decision that this is the way we're going and you guys have to implement it, they can work well together to implement it, even if neither of them agree that it's the right way forward. Right? So you know, there's that aspect as well.
In terms of, I mean, sustainability and sort of more broadly ESG objectives are becoming, I guess, you know, the profile is increasing quite significantly. Did you uncover in the survey any sort of attitudes, or are those being incorporated as part of this digital transformation, sort of identifiably, or is it a sort of, if it were, you know, if what we're doing digital transformation wise benefits that, great, but we're not sort of, you know, it's not a major focus for it. What did you find? Yeah,
so we did find that around 45% of people were saying that the increasing the efficiency of their IT infrastructure was a key consideration as part of these digital transformation strategies. And around a similar similar percentage also said that you know, ESG is a key consideration in their IT infrastructure, and their IT infrastructure is part of their environmental and sustainability goals and reporting. I think looking forward, that's only going to increase with new regulations coming from the EU, the corporate social responsibility reporting directive. I can't remember my acronym here, but essentially the legislation that's coming is that any organization that's working in the EU is going to have to report on their environmental and sustainability goals, and that's going to include the energy that they use to provide their IT services. So I think all of these digital transformations, you know, are going to have to start considering that in the future, and it's good to see that, you know, a good proportion of those organizations are already considering it. Although what was quite interesting, considering that there is regulation coming, is actually the respondents from government organizations were the least likely to have ESG as part of their, you know, as a key driver.
And so, I mean, if you were to summarize the survey, would it be along the lines that sort of everyone's headed towards digital transformation, they recognize the huge opportunities, but they're bumping into some, I guess, some foreseen and some unforeseen obstacles along the way, or yeah, so it's a generally positive picture, but with a bit of caution attached. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, so I think it is a positive picture. People are driving these transformation strategies forward. Clearly, you know, it's going to deliver positive change for businesses, and what was, you know, like I say, what was really great to see is that the people driving the change and the people implementing the change are very much aligned in working together and delivering those strategies. But the break, if you like, is going to be around that data center capacity and being able to deliver the physical infrastructure that underlies all of the digital infrastructure that we have. You know, and organizations are really needing to understand what capacity they have, what capacity they're going to be using in the future, how they can expand that capacity. And I think it's interesting. All of the respondents were UK based, and so you've got the smaller companies that are saying, well, we're going to move to the cloud, we're going to move to colo, which is obviously going to increase the demand for colo space themselves. But you know, a lot of the cloud players use colo space as well. So if the cloud demand goes up, then they're going to be fighting for the same co-location space. And so I think one of the key, and I said previously as well, you know, the key metrics for many of the IT leaders is the speed of being able to deliver those digital services. So I think having the tools that allow organizations to really understand how much of their existing data center capacity they're actually using, how much of that data center capacity is available for future expansion, being able to test out various scenarios around, well, what if we deployed this new application in our existing estate? Can we do that? When do we need to go out to colo or to build a new data center, depending on what the organization's strategy is? Really having that information that's as accurate as possible, and also being able to predict those big changes, like finding a new colo provider or moving out to a new you know, getting a new build, or moving out to the cloud, which might involve, you know, re-architecting of our applications. That when do we make those decisions? How far in advance can we figure out we're going to need to make those decisions? We want to make those predictions accurately. So having the tools to be able to understand the physical layer is really important.
Yeah, and that's a nice sort of segue into yourselves. That's what you do, and I think I saw yesterday, as recently as yesterday, version 17 of was it Six Sigma CDX? I think it was originally you'd have classified it as computational fluid dynamics, but I think now digital twin is more accurate. But so can you give us a bit of an insight into what's new in the latest version, and, you know, what benefits that brings to folks who, as you've just described, you know, looking to understand their current data center environment and what needs to change over time?
Yeah, sure. So the software is kind of aimed at two sets of users. We've got the data center designers and the data center operators. So for the data center designers, we've added a whole range of features around the modeling the fluid networks within the data center. So being able to simulate the chilled water system within your data center alongside the airflow, simulate them at the same time, so you can really understand how those systems work together and look at failures and do all sorts of analysis on that side. And then from the operator's point of view, which I think is more pertinent to this conversation, we've added a lot of features around reporting the capacity of the data center at a level that allows quick decision making. So in release 17, you can create zones in your digital twin and get information very quickly about how much capacity is available in the zone and see where the capacity pinch points are. So is it the cooling? Is it the power delivery? Is it the airflow delivery? All of those bits of information that come from the digital twin come straight into nice, easy to understand metrics, easy to understand graphs, see it on a dashboard. So you can quickly see at a glance where those pinch points are. And of course, the great thing about the digital twin is that it can be running in future mode, if you like. So you can have all of your plans for the next 3 months, the next 6 months implemented in the digital twin. You can see in the dashboard, okay, this is where we're going to be in 6 months time. I can see that we're going to be running out of power, we're going to be running out of breaker capacity, whatever it is that's going to be the pinch point, and then you can start making decisions accordingly based on that.
Okay, well, it's been great to chat to you, so I appreciate you giving us the time, and thanks for your insights. David, thanks very much indeed.
No worries, thanks very much.